What is the harshest truth you've ever learned? My husband and I are friends with a couple. We feel really close to them. Our kids love each other. We have very similar family values. When the wife had surgery, I was pretty emotional, privately. There was a risk of the surgery going horribly wrong. In my head, I was thinking that if they ever needed us to, I would take care of their kids in a heartbeat. No question about it. Her surgery went well. She recovered well. But my husband and I have no family in this country, and we tentatively asked them if they would consider being named legal guardians for our kids. And crickets. I'm not bitter about them not saying yes, because it's a huge thing to ask anyone. I just feel stupid for thinking that my deep feelings for them were reciprocated when they weren't. I still care deeply about them, but I've learned not to assume it goes both ways. Edit. It seems people are assuming a lot of things about the situation, so if you care to read on, I'll explain further. There are certain situations that one can never fully imagine unless you've been there. One of those is leaving your entire social support system and moving to the other side of the world, quite literally, with small kids. Imagine the estate planning lawyer giving you a weird look when you bring your kids to the meeting because you have nobody in this entire hemisphere to watch them for an hour while you have your will drawn up. Imagine said lawyer telling you that your willing sister cannot be named guardian of your kids because she doesn't live in the same country. Imagine having the prospect of your kids entering the foster system way over you for 8+ years. During those years, we made many wonderful, mutually supportive friendships. This friendship was/is different. This family feels like family to us. I admit that I was not wise to ask them what I did. That was why I answered OP's question. I understood it the second they didn't respond. I knew they might react that way, but my feelings for them, and my feelings about my kids being at the mercy of foster parents, clouded my judgment. Of course I have money to support my kids in case of my husband's and my death. We would have discussed that if my friends agreed. I didn't do this without thought or consideration. I'm not mad at my friends. I just learned a lesson that was hard to learn. Story 2. I'm old. What that means is that I've survived, so far, and a lot of people I've known and loved did not. I've lost friends, best friends, acquaintances, coworkers, grandparents, mom, relatives, teachers, mentors, students, neighbors, and a host of other folks. I have no children, and I can't imagine the pain it must be to lose a child. But here's my 2 cents. I wish I could say you get used to people dying. I never did. I don't want to. It tears a hole through me whenever somebody I love dies, no matter the circumstances. But I don't want it to not matter. I don't want it to be something that just passes. My scars are a testament to the love and the relationship that I had for and with that person. And if the scar is deep, so is the love. So be it. Scars are a testament to life. Scars are a testament that I can love deeply and live deeply and be cut or even gouged, and that I can heal and continue to live and continue to love. And the scar tissue is stronger than the original flesh ever was. Scars are a testament to life. Scars are only ugly to people who can't see. As for grief, you'll find it comes in waves. When the ship is first wrecked, you're drowning, with wreckage all around you. Everything floating around you reminds you of the beauty and the magnificence of the ship that was and is no more. All you can do is float. You'll find some piece of the wreckage and you hang on for a while. Maybe it's some physical thing. Maybe it's a happy memory or a photograph. Maybe it's a person who's also floating. For a while, all you can do is float. Stay alive. In the beginning, the waves are 100 feet tall and crash over you without mercy. They come 10 seconds apart and don't even give you time to catch your breath. All you can do is hang on and float. After a while, maybe weeks, maybe months, you'll find the waves are still 100 feet tall, but they come further apart. When they come, they still crash all over you and wipe you out. But in between, you can breathe. You can function. You never know what's going to trigger the grief. It might be a song, a picture, a street intersection, the smell of a cup of coffee. It can be just about anything. And the wave comes crashing, but in between the waves, there's life. Somewhere down the line, and it's different for everybody, you find that the waves are only 80 feet tall or 50 feet tall. And while they still come, they come further apart. You can see them coming. An anniversary, a birthday, or Christmas, or landing at O'Hare. You can see it coming for the most part and prepare yourself. And when it washes over you, you know that somehow you will, again, come out the other side. Soaking wet, spluttering, still hanging on to some tiny piece of the wreckage, but you'll come out. Take it from an old guy. The waves never stop coming, and somehow you don't really want them to. But you learn that you'll survive them, and other waves will come, and you'll survive them too. If you're lucky, you'll have lots of scars and lots of loves, and lots of shipwrecks. Story 4. This was a terrible truth I had to come to terms with in my life, that as much as you try and hope, you may have to face that you will never be really loved by anyone in your whole life. I had a really hard time in my 20s, 30s hoping that I would meet someone who would love me. I was gorgeous and had a very good job, which was nice and interesting. It never happened. I had to face the fact that no one probably would ever love me. Now that I'm over 50, I've come to terms with it. I just try to make myself happy. There are no guarantees of love in this life. You don't always get what you want or deserve. These have been the hardest lessons of my life. Update. I'm in my 50s now. Story 5. Anything can be taken away from you at any time. It can be your sense of security, your purpose in life, your job, your significant other, your dreams, your bodily functions, your hope for the future, your idea of what life is or what it could be. It can all go away in an instant, with no logical or ethical reason why. We live in a stochastic universe. There may be patterns and there may be trends, but we will never truly know how things will turn out. It's the hardest thing to accept in life, but it's also the exact thing that makes life worth living. Story 6. As a teen, I realized nobody cares. If you get into trouble, people don't come out of the woodwork to support you or save you. No coach is going to give you that big speech and then you win at the thing you want to do in life. If you get hurt, a stranger might help you find medical aid, but don't expect anybody to stay for the recovery process. As an adult, I further realized that nobody cares. If you F up, look like an idiot, and generally do badly, the microcosm of critique that was a thing in high school isn't a thing in real life. You don't need to obsess about crap, and you don't need to explain yourself to people. Nobody cares. This is neither good or bad. It's just a perfectly normal fact. Story 7. This is a tie for me. First of all, in all likelihood, a lot of people whose friendships or otherwise relationships you place high value on do not feel that symmetrically, particularly if you happen to be a person prone to regularly expressing love/admiration/affection, etc. Most people, most of the time, don't care about you like you care about them. Second, the traditional wisdom that superlative hard work, attention to detail, ambition, friendliness, and initiative is the coolest thing to a surefire route to success in any given organization is dead effing wrong 95% of the time. Bosses, especially in large organizations, don't want people to perform at such a high level that they're zeroing in on their own jobs or future promotions. And making real friends at work in 2020 is the equivalent of talking to cops from a defense attorney's perspective. It will never, ever, ever help you and can only hurt you. Best outcome is neutral. If you want to succeed in business, go ever so slightly, but consistently, above and beyond. Clock out when it's time to go and leave work and everyone there at work. The good thing about harsh truths is that they are indeed truths. And while these twin realizations sent me into a serious tailspin for about a year not too long ago, I'm much happier today for having gone through that process. I seriously winnowed my field of friends with whom I'm in regular contact, and while it hurt at first, the ones I have now, and I've never been closer or more satisfied with our friendships. And at work, I no longer spend every waking moment at least a little stressed about my performance or what goes on at the workplace. It feels like a miracle, in all honesty. Hope that helps someone out there have a slightly easier go of it than I did in my early 20s. Story 8. Most people are competent at 2, maybe 3, activities. Many are only good at one thing. An easy example of this is teachers. How many of us have had a teacher talk sideways out their ass on a topic they clearly know nothing about, yet acting as if they do? All of us, right? To claim authority in anything that actually matters, for example, politics, requires above-average skill in a wide range of subjects. Psychology, culture, sociology, economy, industry, public and foreign relations, infrastructure, etc., etc. But again, most people are good at usually 2 things, if that. So, in reality, when you turn to authority in any serious matter, like law, it's incredibly unlikely that the person you're counting on actually has most of the knowledge fundamentally necessary to offer any real wisdom, let alone authority. They're just making it up as they go. and applying the limited perspective or two that they have on the matter. And then they claim they know better, when in fact, anyone can see today that even the most powerful people in the world clearly have no true authority, except for what a military affords them. TLDR, you're surrounded by effing morons. You're a effing moron too. And if you don't accept that, you're just gonna keep being an effing moron like me. Story 9. Your memories are wrong. I have a psychology degree. You learn some stuff about how humans work that's confronting. Finding out that memory is not like a video recording on the event the way we think of it, but our brain's best guess at what probably happened, and that there's no correlation between how certain you are about the clarity of a memory and how accurate that memory is deeply upsetting. Countless studies have repeatedly demonstrated that witness testimony is so flawed it shouldn't be used in court, but we continue to use it anyways because we can't accept how rubbish we are at remembering everything. You know how people say things like, everyone remembers what they were doing when Elvis died, or when the Twin Towers collapsed, or some other highly emotive collective event? You know how you're confident you remember the clothes you were wearing, who you were with? Statistically speaking, you're wrong. I know you don't believe me. I know you're sure you're the exception, because you know what you know, right? Nope, you're wrong. Memory doesn't work like that. What you remember isn't what happened, but what you think you should remember happened. All right, I'm going to have to push back on this one just a little bit. Not saying that memory gets distorted over time or that memory can be selective, but there are absolutely moments in my life and in my past where I can close my eyes and just literally go back to that moment, whether it was a moment of trauma, a moment of great happiness. If a moment makes a big enough impact on you psychologically, then it's just not going to leave you, and those finer details absolutely stick in the back. So, according to this person, I'm wrong, but I feel like I'm right, and I feel like other people will agree with me on that. Story 10. It is awful when your sweetest, more giving, closest friend tells you their spouse hasn't hugged, kissed, had sex with them, or said I love you since they were in their late 20s. He's not affectionate or caring towards her. This couple are both in their 60s, and wife, my friend, is now dying of a horrendously painful disease and spends most days alone thanks to her husband and COVID. Those better days never came for her, and I'm mad at the world. It all makes sense now and breaks my heart to know this so late. It was hidden so well since knowing them for 18 years. She admitted that her married life was more painful than what she suffers through now, curled up in bed, in both physical and broken heart pain. Things we don't see until we begin to put all the pieces together. Obviously too late in her case. Wasted life. He stole her life. Remember that things aren't always as they look to others. Damn him, and damn COVID. Story 11. People will do whatever it takes to protect themselves and their reputations, no matter how much they claim to be for integrity and morality, no matter who is harmed. Unnecessary anecdote below since I have a ton of ridiculous life experiences. Almost died because a school nurse prescribed me 2 cold medications to take concurrently that had extreme drug interactions with each other. This effect doubled because she had me taking one med 2 times more frequently than directed and the other 3 times more frequently. I started overdosing at 11 p.m. that night after taking 8 combined doses of each drug that I only should have had 2 doses of. Vomiting, shaking, unable to stand, vision faded and distorted, and ran to the nurse's station from my dorm, boarding high school, with my last bit of energy before collapsing at the door. The same nurse was on night shift, immediately realized what she'd done, and dragged me to the solitary recovery room where she kept dousing my forehead with ice water when I passed out, or kept feeding me crushed ice when I'd come to for hours between sneaking out to man the front desk and pretend no emergency was happening in case a student or dorm parent came through. Between lapses of consciousness, I heard her muttering to herself about how I was going to die and she could not call an ambulance because she'd break and fess up under pressure, and she really needed this job and couldn't afford to be sued. I went from horribly hot and sweaty to freezing cold and sweating bullets. Thirstier than the Sahara was dry. She snatched all the blankets off the bed and stripped my sweater off my body. I saw her take my temperature, and the digital thermometer read 107 degrees Fahrenheit as she gasped and wrung her hands. I sorta just accepted that I, a then 14-year-old, was about to die. I had come in on a Friday night, so I knew no one would find out until the next day. Maybe Sunday, depending on how much hell my mom would raise if I missed our nightly call. I ultimately saved myself when, trying to grab at my sweater from the nightstand with my shaky arms, I accidentally knocked her cup of ice flakes onto my bed and face, then promptly passed out from exertion. I woke up around 3 p.m. the next day, face down in a pool of warm water with a normal temperature of 99 degrees Fahrenheit in a frosty room that was about 60 degrees Fahrenheit because she cranked up the AC while I was out. She snuck into the room a few minutes after I woke up, practically ecstatic and crying, saying she thought I was going to die and that she spent the night in the neighboring recovery room to check on me. She never even signed me into the system that night, as I found out almost a year later. It's been more than 6 years and I've accepted it's just one of those nights that I'll remember for the rest of my life with crystal clarity. Okay, so this story is exactly what I'm talking about. I didn't look ahead in the script or anything, I promise. But the crystal clarity remembering of like such a traumatic event, this goes along with what I was saying about the other poster that said that your memory lies to you and all of that. Like, I have no doubt in my mind that this is exactly how this story or this event overnight went down for this poster. So, thanks. Story 12. I'm very late to this game, but here goes nothing. You are the fault of your problems. Don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about circumstances that happen to you without any of your doing. Violence, theft, natural disaster, etc. What I'm talking about is the following. You're unfulfilled in your life. Why? Is it your job that drains you of your energy? Are you lonely and have no one to talk to? Are you not where you envisioned yourself 10, 20, or even 30 years ago? Why? And that's one of the hardest questions to ask, because the easiest answer is, because of my boss, because of the circumstances, because no one likes me, because others do me wrong. But those are wrong assumptions. It's because of you. You're afraid of change, so you suck up that draining job because of fear, that you won't find the stability. You bury yourself because you told yourself over and over and over again that you're unlovable, so you accept that you will never reach your dreams, just because your brain is telling you that change is something bad. And I get it, change is scary because of the unknown, because of the uncertainty, because of the possibility to fail. But imagine you had this mindset while trying to walk or trying to ride a bike. How many times did you fall? How many times did you scrape a knee in the process? You got up, dusted yourself off, and kept going. Otherwise, you'd still be crawling around on the floor, hating all those people who are able to walk. How unfair! Expose yourself to change. Embrace failure as a teaching method. Get up, dust yourself off, and do something about it. All of you who are complaining that life is short, do you know why? Because you're in a loop of getting up, getting to work, coming home, and going to sleep. This repetition and the lack of new experiences, new goals, new accomplishments is the reason your life is whizzing by, and as soon as you dare to blink, your life is over, and you plead with whatever entity is trying to drag you onto the other side that your time has not yet come, because you haven't visited that one place, or didn't do that one thing you always wanted to try, or haven't talked to that one special person of yours as you always planned. Our mind is not working ascending, but logarithmic. The amount of time you had on summer break when you were 8 will appear a magnitude larger than a complete year in your 30s will be, because it was a higher percentage of your life back then, and you did all this cool and new and unexperienced stuff, and no one could have stopped you. And now you're in a repetitive cycle, and every day, week, and month is blurring into one and the same experience. Walk on the untreated path for the hell of it, just to have new insights, to have new experiences, to make the most of your life. You're in a job that's unfulfilling? Change it, learn something new, and try to make a career out of that. You're lonely? Then go out, go to a party. Not now, obviously, but as soon as this whole ordeal is over. Try to get in touch with new people. A stranger is just a friend that you haven't met yet. You haven't reached your goals yet? Work on that. Small steps every day. As soon as you turn around, you'll see that you're miles away from where you were a couple of months ago. But you need to act. You need to acquaintance yourself with unfamiliarity, with change, with the possibility of failure, and muster not the strength, but the willpower to overcome the hurdles. I'm very sure that almost everyone reached a point where they said, stop, this is enough. Now I'm going to change something. And if you look back to that moment, you'll almost certainly realize that now is better than then. Harness this feeling, the breaking point, that you got off your ass and into action mode. You are the problem. Nothing more and nothing less. Go out and change. I agree with this post 100% completely. I think this needs to be like blasted into the ears of every single working adult out there that just kind of settles into this loop of mediocrity, and they don't really do anything with their lives, and they complain that their lives are boring or that they're unfulfilled, when in actuality, yes, you are in total control. And it's easier said than done, but it can be done. So yeah, read this again, listen to it back again. It makes total sense. I agree with it completely. Story 13. The truth every 20/30-year-old person eventually learns: that the real world is a harsh place where everyone is a greedy F looking out for their own self-interest, and that you alone are the only thing who can improve your life. There is no fantasy. None of the fantasy you grew up with are real. Growing up with the fantasies only made you weaker. There are no aliens. Humans are not meant to live on another planet. Human species have evolved to live on Earth. It's foolish to think that humans can live a good life in space or on another planet. When a person passes, their mortal remains become a part of the Earth, just like the thousands of generations of humans before them. When you were young, people used to say that you can be anything in the world. People only say that to make kids happy. As time passes, one slowly realizes that it might not be true. Hope at least some of the things above are actually false. Story 14. In college, I finally realized that I was a racist piece of crap. I started to address my behavior and tried to learn more about what I was doing and saying. I found out because I got in this huge fight with a black woman in my dorm. I left the dorm in a fuming rage, and my friend came with me to talk about the fight. I realized that I was the a-hole when I started going back inside to continue the fight, and he told me I was absolutely in the wrong and didn't get it. He then basically sat me down and explained what a piece of crap I was, and then my entire teenage years got put in a different perspective. I started to see all the crappy things I had ever done put into a different perspective. All the snide racial comments and all the notions I had finally clicked with me about how they're harmful and why my behavior needed fixing. I then started to actually open my mind to social justice, institutionalized racism, and other left-leaning causes. I used to laugh at them, but when I finally started opening my mind and paying attention, it all made so much sense that I couldn't ignore it. Lastly, I met my girlfriend at that time, and she basically helped me become better. She's from an extremely marginalized community and was able to help me address my racism and bullcrap that I got from growing up and hanging out with racists in high school. I wish I could contact that woman from my dorm again and tell her she changed my life for the better. She was a saint and even helped me study for finals while I was still a racist a-hole. But we stopped speaking after that fight and were not on good terms. That single moment/fight was a catalyst for me though in dozens of ways and absolutely shaped who I am today. Story 15. Probably that no matter how much you like or love someone, it doesn't mean they will reciprocate. Falling in love is biochemistry. It either happens or not, and you cannot really be mad at someone because they don't fall in love with you. Maybe they will actually really like you and would love to be friends with you, but if there isn't that spark, if they don't get the butterflies when they see you, if they don't miss you the moment you leave, if they're not thinking of, damn, I really wish he or she was here with me to do this thing with me, it really isn't their fault and you should just have to accept it and move on. It doesn't mean that it will never happen. Love is something that often has a place and a time. Maybe in 19 years you meet someone and the opposite might happen. Or conditions might just be perfect for the two of you. Or you might even just really dislike how that person turned out, but that's just life. Story 16. Ex-atheist here. So I was raised Christian only in the sense that Jesus and God were about as important as Santa. I remember as a child, once I figured out Santa wasn't real, beginning to question if God was a big lie made up by adults as well. By the time I reached adolescence, I realized I had no real reason to believe in God and began identifying as an atheist. I believed in no gods. I pondered the subject greatly and decided that it made much more sense that all religions were wrong rather than one being right. That there was no hard evidence for God, and that everything in the Bible sounded like absolute nonsense, especially in light of my education in the sciences. The thing is that I understood that nothing could possibly matter but the answer to the question, do I have a purpose? And I never stopped seeking if there was an answer. Nothing else was worth seeking, so I never stopped thinking about that very subject. All the conclusions I came to, everything I saw pointed to religion being utter nonsense. The religious being the foolish and the uneducated, and that all of life and existence was some random accident that just happened to occur and would be over as soon as it started. I never questioned that stance until the day I had a good friend talk to me. He didn't have incredible thought-provoking statements. He didn't have nearly any answers, but he had faith. I was mocking this man to the face for the beliefs he held dearest, and he was brushing aside my rudeness as if it were leaves in his path. His message was clear. It was that he knew that there was a God and that he was Jesus Christ. He confessed himself that he didn't have all the answers, but he knew religious leaders I could talk to that did. He was sure. I laughed off the entire conversation at that moment, but I distinctly remember in the moments before I fell asleep that night asking myself, could I have been wrong all this time? It was the first time I was no longer 100% sure there was no God, and it opened a new chapter in my life. I had spent years finding every single reason to not believe in God, but had never taken the time to consider that there might actually be reasons to think that he exists, and I began to see them. The fact that the theme of human existence is the struggle between good and evil points directly towards him. Without God defining good and evil, all of our struggles, all of our dreams, all of our desires, all of our love, all of it was just a bunch of complex chemical reactions. Everything I knew told me that all that we experience and live is real. It's tangible. I was living it. Not only this, but I realized that this universe was made so that life, the only thing that could give existence meaning and purpose, could and would occur. Whatever caused this universe to happen made it so that it could and would have purpose. That demands sentience. That demands God. These thoughts continued for a month until I realized one day that it was true. It was all true. There was a God, and his love for us was so evident. The love of a God that put breath in our lungs. The love of a God that lets the sun shine on our backs. The love of a God that lets us look into our loved ones' eyes is the same God that multitudes had claimed to have witnessed to walk this earth in the flesh and lay down his life to save us. Everything became so clear in that moment. That night was the most incredible night of my life as I fell on my knees in repentance of my sins, willowing to follow Jesus as my Lord. I received the Holy Spirit and was born a new man who put all of this sin behind him in that moment. I went to all those in my life, all those I had instilled my brand of atheism into, and professed to them that I was wrong and that they needed to repent as well. I had found myself in the midst of a group that was getting more heavily involved in crime to fuel our drug usage. I was laughed to scorn and quickly found myself living my days alone. It's been quite a few years since that day, and I now find myself in a thriving church community that's living in obedience to Jesus. I couldn't even begin to explain to you the joy and mirth of knowing your Creator, of knowing your purpose, and of knowing your family that you will go to spend eternity with. This world is just the beginning that only those who are willing to repent of their sin and obey God will find eternal paradise to be their end. If I hadn't found Jesus, I know I would have been found guilty at the judgment of my sin and justly been condemned to an eternal hell for what I had done. My Creator loved me enough to give me a second chance, loved me enough to seek me and show me his love, loved me enough to walk this earth in the flesh and die at the hands of his own creation so that he could pour out his blood as payment for what I'd done. He rose from the dead to the witness of hundreds and has given his spirit to countless thousands so that we could know that this was the truth. Story 17. Nobody's life revolves around anyone's. Exception is our family that we live with 24/7. So don't be unhappy that people didn't remember your birthdays or some special events. How much you care for them, it might not be replicated back, leading to second truth that not everyone has the same replication for feelings that others have for them. Third is that beauty is different for everyone, but our mothers are always the most beautiful women we ever see. That's why nobody hates their mothers if they're black, fat, or ugly. They just love them because of their nature and their warm heart. The things their mother did for children. That's why your mother might be the worst woman for me, while my mother would be the worst person you met on the bus. Both of our mothers will be the best and most beautiful women we all meet. Trust me, philosophies are true, made by me, first and third. Second is by many others earlier too. That makes zero sense. Moving on. Story 18. How goddamn alone I'm going to be when I move out of my parents' house. Currently live with my parents and two brothers. Rarely ever talk to the older brother. Not much for us to talk about. My younger brother is 2 years younger than me, and last year when he left to go to university, I suddenly realized how empty my life was. I have no friends, because I never bothered to maintain my friendships after high school ended. I just didn't care. My coworkers can be good fun to hang around with, but not personal friends with any of them. I don't hang out with any of them or anything like that. When my younger brother came back from university after 1 month because he couldn't stand what he'd gotten himself into, I was very happy to see him again. I enjoy talking with him since we both dabble in the same world of video games, YouTube, internet news, and politics, and he's currently back in the university this year, but it's online university, so I can still talk to him. But when I finally move out, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to find a way to build friendships and find a girlfriend. Alas, I keep putting off trying to get a jump on what must be done in life, and I'm content to just keep spending my days living at home going nowhere, just waiting for my job to really kick me in the nads and send me to another town to work for more pay. Story 19. Some people never really grow. They never learn their lesson. They never recognize their mistakes. They never acknowledge their faults. They never admit they were in the wrong. You will never receive an apology from them, and you will never see their behavior change. Dealt with that from my ex-friend of 6 years. He was manipulative, but lazy, piece of crap, and an incel/self-proclaimed nice guy. He acted like he would change, but never did. Instead, he got worse. Cut it off earlier this year. He never moved on from liking me when I didn't reciprocate. Instead of moving on, brought another person into the mix. He only dated them to make me jealous, which didn't work, and used them to move out. Made that person hate me, even though we got along, and tried to push my friends away from me. Thankfully, that last part failed since I'd been friends with those friends for way longer, and they knew he was lying and trying to slander me. He blamed all his problems on me and never took responsibility for his actions. I'm still healing because he said some really hurtful things a few months ago, but it's nice to be able to breathe again without him constantly dragging me down. Last I heard of him, he became a hoarder and alcoholic who regularly abuses his partner, including leaving them at a sketchy gas station at night, and is overall turning his life to crap. Boy howdy, am I glad I'm done with that mess. After leaving him and realizing how much of an a-hole he was, it felt like a weight had been lifted. No longer could he drag me down to his level. Story 40. Long backstory. When I was about 3 to 4 years old, at the insistence of my mom, Barbara, I remembered speaking to my stepmom, Dolores, and she also sent me some stuff in the mail from Chicago. Some clothes and some cool water guns. When I asked Mom, how is she my stepmom? She married to my dad. How come I didn't talk to him/meet him? By the way, I don't know my father. I forget the explanations I got, but I don't remember being upset about it. Less than a week before my 8th birthday, Dolores passed away. A couple days later, my grandmother, on my mother's side, passed away as well, and they had a dual service for them, on my 8th birthday. When I was 12, my mother Barbara, who raised me, had been diagnosed with cancer. She and I had a long talk about serious stuff. When she asked me if there is anything I wanted to know or ask her, I asked, why is my first name this, since I only use my middle name, and my last name this, since I was the only person in my family with that last name? That's when I was hit with the oh crap face, and she told me that my stepmom Dolores was my birth mother, but she became sick and she couldn't take care of me, so she, Barbara, her sister, took me in so I wouldn't go to foster/group homes. So I'm like, so you're really my aunt? And my 3 brothers and sister, who had matching last names, are really my cousins? She said yes and asked if I was mad about it. I said no. Since I couldn't tell the difference and that she really loves me like them. When I was 14 and on Halloween, Barbara passed away. When I was 33, married, and just had my first kid, I was talking to my aunt, a third sister, Lynn, and she accidentally revealed the following. 2 days after I was born in California, Lynn, who's in Chicago, ran into a friend of hers that said she just saw Dolores that not even hours ago. Lynn said that's not possible since Dolores is in California. She must have seen someone else. The friend rebuffed and said no, it was her. She talked to her and clarified it wasn't from a distance. My aunt asked did she see the baby, me, but the friend said she, Dolores, didn't have a baby with her. Lynn calls her mom, my grandmother, to check it out. My grandmother sent Barbara and she managed to intercept me from being taken to the system. So for decades, I thought some period after I was born, like a year or two, that my birth mother gave custody to my aunt. But instead, I was left behind, and only on a complete interstate and time zone chance and whim, my life turned out the way it did. And yes, I've had huge abandonment issues even before I found this out at 33. I'm 38 now. Story 21. My parents have been divorced ever since I was an infant. I only saw my dad every other weekend and on certain holidays. My parents hated each other and always talked crap about the other when I was around. Since I barely knew my dad, I always thought he was a great guy, always nice to me and always there when I needed support. But my mother kept telling me he was the exact polar opposite and he was only being nice to me because he wanted me to live with him so my mom would pay him child support instead of the other way around. I didn't believe her. I thought she just didn't want me to live with him out of spite and that she always trashed him because of her biased hatred. To spare an additional long story, my mom and I finally had a falling out, and I moved out and lived with my dad for 2 years with the promise that he wouldn't ask my mom for child support since I was 18. The harshest truth I learned was that everything my mom said about my dad was true. He acted like I was his whole world, but stopped giving me support when I asked. He sued my mom on Valentine's Day for child support and won. He somehow managed to get her to pay double, and my mom almost lost her house because she could barely afford to pay it. There were other problems too, but I really don't want to talk about them. I was heartbroken because all I ever wanted was for my dad to love me, but all he did was use me and emotionally abuse me. I'm 27 now and I barely talk to him. My mom and I managed to sit down and have a heart-to-heart and have actually repaired our relationship. I call her often and visit when I can. I truly regret moving in with my dad, but the cruel truth is I had to learn who he was myself since I never listened to my mom about anything. Story 22. That my busy life ended my most precious friendships. My advice to you, make time in your busy life for your friends on a regular basis. Like weekly kind of regular. Could just be a couple of texts, could be a phone call, just check in. So I'm officially old. That said, I find it harder to make new friends the older you get. But I wouldn't have had to if I had understood that people who love us will fade from our lives if we get too busy to stay in some type of contact. I get it. We all get busy, and we figure that our friends are busy too. But the people I cared about keeping close to me just faded away over time because I couldn't keep in touch with them. I felt that my life was too busy and that they would understand that. They would text me and I'd be slow to respond. They would call and I'd be too busy to answer, promising myself I'd call them back soon. Really, I'd call them as soon as I was done with X, but there was always a new X right away and I would eventually forget. Texts would stop coming. Calls eventually stopped too. When I noticed, I'd text/call them only to receive a lukewarm response. That really hurt. I thought friends would understand. Someone finally explained it to me like this. If you can't be bothered, I eventually can't be bothered either. You know how you felt when you get lukewarm responses? Well, that's how I felt every time you sent me to voicemail or didn't return a text. Ouch. So that's my advice. No matter how hard it seems to be at the time, keep in regular contact with the people you love. Story 15. That it's possible to not be successful by any standard you hold and still be more successful to someone who hasn't achieved that. Privilege is real and has two sides. During the pandemic, this has shown up in me staying employed and my friends not. I ended up having to distance myself from folks because they started to get upset at my spending habits. What was so offensive? I spent a few thousand kidding myself out on a bike because I don't own a car. This spring our grocery stores were empty and I could only order canned food from Amazon. That was super stressful, and I just wanted to know I was safe. Meanwhile, my unemployed friends outside of NYC have cars and never worried about this. So now I'm vulnerable to death from COVID and incredibly isolated because I got sick of people in my closet support network telling me not to waste my money on something that's making me healthier and keeping me in touch with people. Because I could spend the money to do so, and they resented it, so it had to be bad. There's no good solve for it, just distancing myself until their lives stabilize or mine destabilizes in a way they can relate to. Story 24. I don't know what my lesson was exactly. Maybe that fairness, evenness, or even some cosmic balance like I imagined in my head doesn't exist. My father-in-law was killed by a drunk driver in 2009, and I distinctly remember the thought popping into my head that our other three parents were going to be fine and live long lives because we had our tragedy. It was such a dumb way to think. Like, even at the time, I knew better. But I felt this weird relief, like somehow tragedy wouldn't strike twice. Then, in 2014, my healthy 62-year-old dad died on vacation with my mom. We still don't totally know the cause of death because of the complications of it occurring in a foreign country, but it was completely and totally unexpected. Our kids were born a year later, and they won't know their grandpas, and it makes me so sad. But I did learn whatever I learned from it. Despite being an optimist, I learned that something bad can happen at any time, and I still tense up at the phone ringing. Story 25. There's no helping a person who won't help themselves. They will drag you down with them and expect you to solve their problems, and when you can't anymore, they will say you left them in the dirt and forget the times you sacrificed to help them. It's not your job to fix anymore. You're nobody's therapist. You're not a punching bag, nor a doormat. You're your own person, dealing with your own set of issues. Extending a helping hand when you yourself are having difficulty swimming through life's currents will break you. Self-destructive people will keep on taking and taking until you have nothing left to give, and have the audacity to call you selfish and untrue when there's nothing else you can do. You'd think they were drowning and rush to their rescue, only to find yourself drowning in the currents they have adapted to navigating. You'll find yourself in a worse state than the one you were attempting to save, and what's even worse is that they won't help you. Protect your peace and your boundaries at all costs. If their presence triggers your own anxiety and trauma, get away. You must never fix bridges you did not break. It's not your job to extend an olive branch to enmities that you did not stir. Trust patterns of behavior, trust actions more than words, and trust your intuition. Story 26. That despite what you think any economic system will treat you, it's really only up to you. You're never going to get 33% of some billionaire, and we all live happy and free. Listen, I want world peace just as much as you do, but it's just not realistic. It's never worked in societies. We've tried socialism plenty of times to realize it doesn't work. Simply look at history. As much as you hate capitalism, the main thing you must understand is that it's only up to you. No one is going to help you here except you. The idea of capitalism puts it on the individual to pull their boots up off the ground and go for whatever you want to be. Wouldn't you rather be whatever you'd like to be instead of everyone getting the exact same wage rate and just sitting around? Capitalism sucks, but it's the lesser of all evils. Hear me out. Go apply online somewhere or just start making a goal towards something you want to be, because one day you're going to look back and wish you had at least tried. If you have any confusion towards modern economic policies, just DM me and let's chat a few. I promise I don't bite, and I only bring empirical evidence into discussions. Source: Degree in Economics. Story 27. The harshest truth I ever learned was about a week ago. The love of my life ended up getting arrested, and when he did, the cops gave me the keys back to my car. Inside the car, I found the spare keys that he said he lost. I also found several phones, and inside those phones, with many dating sites. From there, I found his Instagram account where he's paying escorts for sex. We have a 15-month-old son together, and I was curious how long he had been unfaithful. Come to find out, he was unfaithful wild 5 days after we got together. The last 2 years, he's been a great stepdad to my 2 other children. I thought he was a good man to me. Because I've never checked up on him, I never realized that he was being unfaithful. He was also an alcoholic and doing drugs behind my back. Crazy how you think you know somebody. Love is truly blind, and in this case, deaf and dumb too. Not sure I'll ever recover. Story 28. You just can't force yourself to love someone, even if you know they love you a lot. It's the other side of the coin to what many people have already said here about not being able to make someone love you. Sometimes you just can't look at a person the same way they look at you, and it's absolutely normal. Forcing yourself into a relationship just out of some sort of guilt, hoping you'll learn to love them, is in most cases unfair to the person who has real feelings and hopes you do, because essentially you're pretending for their sake, and it's a form of a lie. I feel like a lot of people who are full of empathy will just give in and date somebody they aren't interested in just because that person is clearly crazy about them and they feel bad rejecting them. Trust me, it's a recipe for disaster in most cases. You'll either decide you can't do it anymore when you're in a relationship for a longer time and break the person's heart. You will actually fall in love with someone else and feel awful for breaking up/cheating just to be with them, or you'll be stuck forever with someone you don't really love and never truly be happy. You don't know anyone love. Story 29. Does anyone say longtime lurker on here anymore? Because that's definitely me. True love and the pain of losing that special someone will never go away. It's been over a year since things fell apart and I still have several daily breakdowns. I'm in my early 30s. We started dating at 19 and now I can't even stomach the thought of saying the L word to anyone, especially female friends. Sorry, gals. 13 plus years together, married for 7, no kids, but we had 4 Datsuns. I gave her several chances, but she lost my trust one too many times. All I asked for was honesty and repeatedly caught her in lie after lie. After catching her in yet another lie, I told her I couldn't handle it anymore and that she needed to get her own place. The only thing that kept us together the last month was our dying dog and half-ass attempts at couples counseling. She refused to let me euthanize our dog day of, and when I drove home from work to check on him one day, he was dead. She moved out the next day, taking our new bed and many other belongings with her too. Apparently, she had already set herself up with an apartment earlier that week. After losing my entire family in one day, I spiraled hard into a deep depression. She took my sweetheart dog and the others too. A week later, my doctor diagnosed me with PTSD, anxiety, and severe depression as well. Yes, I'm taking meds and saw a therapist for a while too. In the middle of the divorce, COVID hit. I lost my career, and I had to figure out how to continue to pay my lawyer all at the same time. Man, I miss my dogs so much. I'd collapse if I saw her walking them around town with her new boyfriend. They moved in together at the closest possible apartment complex to my house and walk through my neighborhood frequently. I can't even stand to go to my own home anymore, and don't due to severe breakdowns. They say when it rains, it pours, but this is more like a never-ending tsunami. To those who think it's okay to cheat on your spouse, or to even make your significant other wonder if you're cheating, from the bottom of my heart, I sincerely say, F you, cheaters. I'll toot my own horn. I'm a great guy, but I have no interest in letting anyone get that close to me ever again. Also, never drink alcohol on SSRI/antidepressants. Just 2 drinks and I've gone into complete blackout autopilot mode, and that's a great way to forget where you parked. Or even worse, I could end up hurting innocent people. I've quit booze now, don't worry. Hopefully, sharing my comparatively insignificant experience randomly on the internet will help at least one person prepare for true heartbreak in the future. Good luck, everyone. Story 30. That just because someone didn't raise a hand on you or call you hurtful things doesn't mean they didn't hurt you. To elaborate, my mother is abusive, as in physically and mentally. I've always avoided her and went to my father because he didn't hurt me. To be honest, that's the main reason I loved him. He didn't consciously hurt me. That he would look at me and listen without throwing venom at me. But then I realized that he didn't help me either. He didn't say anything when I'm literally sobbing on the ground next to him. He didn't do anything when I got bruises. He didn't do anything when I needed help. He was just there and nothing more, and I loved him so effing much for that. But then I realized that he honestly did nothing to warrant his love. He didn't stop my mother. He didn't tell her to back off. He didn't come to my assistance when in need. He didn't sit down and discuss my feelings. He did absolutely nothing. He had the job of protecting me, but he didn't. He had the job to make me happy, and he didn't. He had the job to comfort me, but he didn't. He never raised a hand on me, cursed my existence, or called me insults, but with his silence, it felt like he did much worse than my mother could even hope to do. Story 31. Eventually, the only person that cares about you when you're at your lowest starts to see why others don't show as much sympathy. I remember when I was 18, still a kid, I was severely addicted to cocaine and amphetamines. My family eventually started catching on, but I still denied it. Till one day, I realized I had a serious problem. I had called my mom to come get me, and I finally admitted I had a problem. Rather than her scolding me and showing she was disappointed, she wrapped me in the most warm blanket of care and compassion I've ever seen her give me, coming from a place of a caring mother. However, I continued to do drugs, even though I did desperately want to stop. My dad was really harsh about it, considering he was down that road and other family members looked down on me. I was so scared for my life. I had quit my job. I needed to pay for my things and help with bills, or else my dad would kick me out, being I dropped out and he didn't like that at all. On top of that, I had multiple scares where I was convinced I was going to die in front of them. My dad was extremely cold about everything, and my mom would always come to comfort me and tell me everything was going to be okay, and hold me like I was a baby all over again. Till one day I came home extremely high, and I got into a big argument with my dad, who was incredibly harsh and said a few things. I started crying, and my mom just looked at me and shook her head and told me, "I'm done," and walked away. The following days, I'd come home wired all over again, and she'd just shake her head in disgust. I later went to her and told her I was tired of the way I was living, and to my complete surprise, she just shrugged me off and walked away again. I have to say, that was probably the coldest day of my life. Everyone in the world had turned against me. No one cared about me anymore. Now my own mom didn't want anything to do with me, and I can't put into words how alone and broken I felt. How absolutely rock bottom emotionally I felt. I just wanted someone to care. I just wanted to know that I was still loved, even if I mess up. I just wanted to know if she still saw me as her sweet baby or just some low-down drug addict. I'm happy to say I've been sober for 3 years now, have a beautiful daughter, and a beautiful woman who's an amazing mother to her. I guess another harsh truth is you have to lose all support to build your own foundation to be able to move forward when everything falls apart. If you're reading this and you have a problem with drugs, you can beat this thing and kick it to the curb. If you need someone to talk to, please message me. I'll respond almost immediately. Love you guys. Take care. Sorry for the long book. Haha. Story 32. That no one stays forever. That the only constant is change. At some point or another, I've had marking relationships which showed this really well. Someone might be beloved and make a silly mistake, and it can either ruin your connection or make it stronger, or change nothing at all. That despite trying my very, very best, I can't make them stay, and I don't have to, because I want the best for them, even if they might not. And that I need to cherish every moment because it's precious, and it will go away at some point. Keep the good moments. Learn from the bad and don't focus on it. Focus on changing, accepting change, and loving yourself, and loving others the best that you can right now. There are so many people in this world who will come and go in your life, and blow your mind if and when they do. But you have to let them in, and you have to know to keep out the ones who would do you hurt at the same time. It will hurt and burn and bring the best moments of your life and what feels like the very worst. It can be long or short, but it'll be so worth it. Please love the people who you love, not inwardly, but outwardly, and right now, before they too go away. Story 33. It's impossible to change people if they're not willing and wanting to change. This is why our society sucks. The only thing you can do is offer help and hoping they'll notice you. For example, smoking or alcohol. Only the mental position and inner choices of person determines their life. They can only stop harming their body if they not just understand, but truly realize it. Because a person will not progress if he doesn't have motivation for it. If the person says he wants it, but still does nothing, then he's just lying to himself and is probably binded by society standards that are not correct on this case, aka alcohol drinking culture or STH, stuff like that. Any political measures of prohibition will result in black market sales growing. If anything, the transition should be slow to avoid aggression. So the change in people's mind will not cause them any harm. However, it is your responsibility if your advices can grow a monster. Therefore, you better should care what you say and how you say it. Story 34. That I'm just not cut out for some things. You get hired as an experimental position. You get trained and do your best. You get no complaints for the first 6 months, so you do life stuff. You and your partner, wife in my case, buy a house, get a dog, and start settling into life. Turns out you effing hate this job and cry pretty much daily, but you have a life to maintain. You start to hear rumblings that maybe things aren't going so well at work. Anxieties. You ask your boss, you ask your coworkers, is the work you're doing satisfactory? I get assured, yeah, it's fine, which is a problem. I get no affirmation. After a year of working your ass off at this job you hate, you get called into your boss's office. As you walk into your boss's office, you notice an HR rep, and my boss slides over a piece of paper. As soon as I sit down, he starts talking, and I can barely keep up. You know, unscarred voice, when we hired you, we knew it was an experimental position, and it just didn't work out. I say, wait, Are you firing me? I'm kind of in shock as he hands me a box and watches me unpack my desk. My car was actually in the shop, so I had to call my wife to come pick me up from the parking lot because my car is in the shop. As I'm outside waiting for her, 4 people walk into the building and say, "Good morning," as I'm holding my box of stuff. Now, I hated this job, but I did my effing best, and my best wasn't good enough. Your best isn't good enough for a lot of things. I have a new job, well, 3 years isn't new, and I like it. It isn't exciting or experimental, but I like it. They like me. I get daily affirmation, but the last job showed me that I'm near as smart or capable as I used to believe, and that hit me like a sack of bricks. Story 35. This one may not strike the same tone as the others posted in this thread, but here goes. I'm okay right now. I have a place to sleep and something to eat for my next many meals. I'm not sick, I have a job, I have a family that loves me. All the things that I worry about almost never come true, and the ones that do are never as bad as I thought. That means that the society is of my own doing. It comes from inside me, not circumstances around me, and once I understood that, I realized that even if I didn't have food and a home and a family, that I'm okay if I decide that I'm okay. I'm okay with hunger. I'm okay with death. I can't control it anyway. I'm okay with anything that might come. Yes, I feel pain, but it's not the boss of me. I am. That is an incredibly harsh truth. Story 36. Pediatric specialist physician here. Poem plus ICU. There are children who will live lives of utter suffering through no fault of their own. Children who are born with some terrible disease only to live short lives of unadulterated misery, extended through the desperate benevolence, or rather perceived non-malfeasance, of healthcare providers and parents alike who extend the misery with medical technology and no end in sight. There's no cosmic order or sense to this, just simple, horrifying tragedy. There's no consolation for these families or explanation, just a nihilistic pit that erodes at whatever coping mechanisms you attempt to construct. You'll hear trite, even glib aphorisms from family and pastors in the books they cite as though the paper castles they build out of them can stand up to a literal ocean tide of grief. No, the universe is broken, and the sense of our place in it is intimately revealed when you encounter the suffering some of these children must endure. And you hate the men who say otherwise, and you hate God. Look, I have no idea what this poster is talking about. I was just too entranced by the choice of words, that was like they just pulled them straight out of a thesaurus. I'm sorry if I butchered some of those words. I'm obviously not as smart as this pediatric specialist physician. But yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to how very well written that post was. Story 37. I'm a crappy person. It wasn't something that came on overnight. It took years of questioning and soul-searching to figure it out, but I learned it right around the time I turned 20. I was a sophomore at uni, in the physics track, and I got mono. For 6 weeks, even the most basic physical activities were exhausting. I was sleeping 14 hours a day, cleaned through all my alarms, and still woke up so exhausted I wanted to cry. My relationships fell apart. I had no friends, no will to do anything. I started smoking, drinking, and doing whatever hard drugs I could get my hands on, night after night after night. The whole time I blamed the mono and my chronic genetic depression. Even after the mono cleared up, I was still falling into those tendencies. Then I started watching BoJack Horseman. For those of you who haven't seen it, BoJack Horseman is a phenomenal adult comedy about a washed-up sitcom actor who's beginning his midlife crisis. The show seems comical, but is actually a deep and accurate look at the human condition, depression, and the search for meaning and forgiveness. BoJack suffers from severe self-destructive tendencies and often hurts the people around him because of it, but no matter how many times he screws up, he's incapable of changing his behavior. At one point in the show, the main character's best friend has finally had enough of BoJack's crap. It's not the alcohol, or the drugs, or any of the crappy things that happened to you during your career, or when you were a kid. It's you, alright? It's you. I burst into tears. It was the first time anything, real or otherwise, had so accurately nailed why I had been failing to improve for so long. It wasn't any of the things that had happened. It was me. Story 38. When you get married, people will often tell you communication is key. What they don't tell you is what communication is. People hear communication and they think of the mundane conversations you have on a daily basis. The "how was your day" stuff. That's not communication. That's just talk. Communication is the willingness to have the conversations you don't want to have. The ability to bring up things you're afraid to talk about. It's being willing to confess something even if you're afraid it will endanger or end the relationship. Communication is key because without it, unexpressed feelings are left to fester and grow into resentment. So many people hold their tongues for years in order to save the relationship, when it turns out that staying silent is often what actually endangers it. Unexpressed feelings will come out one way or another. You can't bottle them up. When you try, all that will happen is that they will be expressed in uglier and far more unpredictable ways and circumstances. Expressing those bad feelings early, in a controlled manner, can oftentimes alleviate them. If something bothers you, simply telling your SO that it bothers you can actually help it stop bothering you. Story 39. Just because they say they'll love you forever and that they would never ever leave you, doesn't mean they will feel the same a year or two from then. At the time when I first heard those words, I was hesitant, but then soon came to believe them wholly, and I reciprocated those words. It was our first real love, and after 6 years, it finally ended, just 2 months ago. Some people get worn out. Some don't want anything to change. Others want many things to change, but mostly people just get tired, to the point where they can't fake it anymore. What was very real at 21 can change drastically at 26. Some things can't be fixed, no matter what you try to do. You can't make someone love you. You can't make someone care. It usually only ends up doing the opposite. You can claw and pry, but it'll either briefly prolong the inevitable, probably out of pity, or bring things to a sudden end. Most of the time, the person leaving has made their decision a long time ago, so when the time finally comes, it can seem so devoid of any humanity. How they leave so suddenly and without remorse. But you have to realize they've been suffering silently for months or even years at that point, and they'd just rather be alone. It doesn't matter what you've been through. We've had the best times of our lives together, traveled across the country, been in life and death situations, etc. And everything came to an end when things were seemingly the most stable, when we were at our wealthiest and the most mentally clear. Haven't seen her in 2 months. We've only texted a few times to work out apartment lease issues, and each time I have to reach out, I end up feeling awful, just anxiety and dread, because I can tell through her responses that it really is the end, that all of it is over now. There's no more fighting, arguing, any sort of emotion, just either no response or flat and cold statements, as if we weren't even acquaintances. I don't think we'll ever see each other again, and it can be difficult to cope with that no more memories are to be made. But you have to remind yourself, if this is how things ended, things aren't going to 180 overnight. Things won't suddenly change in a month, or 2, or 6, that it may and probably will be like this forever. People just change, and with that, so do their promises. Story 40. The fact that no matter what, you will never really appreciate what you have, especially health. You can be grateful for it, but it will never be the same as when you did not have it and gained it. From personal experience, I had a car accident a few years ago. We flew out from the road in 130 kilometers per hour when trying to overtake the bus, but car came in opposite direction, which driver did not see. I was sitting behind the driver. Up until then, the worst thing that ever happened to me was bruised knees or climbing trees and falling, but being okay with just a little bit of blood and a bruise kind of thing. We ended up on the roof in the ditch. I ended up in a bed for 3 months with multiple fractures, ribs, vertebrae, pelvis, etc., concussion, bleeding external and internal, and dislocated shoulder. In those 3 months, I wasn't allowed to even sit. Because of the fractures, they thought I might get paralyzed or bones would not heal properly or even connect again. My happiest day in my life was when after we flew away and landed on the roof, I woke up and I realized I'm alive and that I can move my feet and arms. Literally, happiest day of my life no matter what. Second happiest day of my life was when after those 3 months, they let me sit for the first time and I could eat on my own. Third happiest day of my life was when after those few more weeks, I was allowed to stand up, and after that day or 2 later, stand up plus wobble walk with crutches and people supporting me, and it worked. And from there, it just got better and better. Back then, I figuratively would hold the gratefulness I felt for something so stupid as being able to look up, neck vertebrae broken, or even sit. Now, as grateful as I am, I sometimes wish to go through that again, just so I can really appreciate that. Scary, but eye-opening experience. I'm thankful and grateful that I don't have to lay in bed for days, but if I had to objectively say how much in 100% I think the gratefulness I feel now versus then, I would say back then it was 101%. Now, as best as I can achieve, like barely 50%. The higher you get, harder it gets. Story 41. Ended up kind of long, posted from mobile. Don't let others take advantage of your kindness. Don't try and suppress your emotions. They're all valid, and pushing pain inside just prolongs it or lets it build up until you burst. Be grateful, be honest, be kind, be respectful, and be true to yourself. Defend yourself. You decide your worth, not the world and not other people. If you're in a dark place, odds are you're the only one who can get you out of it. Yes, seek help. It ain't weak to speak and truly does help. But you do have to do the work. It begins with you. There will be setbacks, there will be trials, there will be pain, but there will be progress. There will be small victories. There will be a realization that your life can be what you make it. Dealing with mental health issues for most of my life, and these things have really helped me. Mostly in the last 5 years, I've gone from wanting to self-unalive, nihilistic, feeling worthless, drugged up all the time, to moving past childhood traumas, realizing my own self-destructive patterns, focusing on the good and the right way forward in life. We only get one life. Choose happiness. Choose kindness. Choose love, even if at first you don't believe it. Story 42. That nobody is going to magically appear and make you feel better. Nobody will just appear and fix everything for you. And if somebody does appear who wants to fix you, they actually are most likely there to take advantage of your weakness. I've had depression and anxiety since I was a kid, and so many people took advantage of my kindness. That kindness was me trying to make friends, trying to find people who would care about me so that I would have a reason to live. And you know what? I still don't think I have a reason for living, but I don't think I need a purpose in my life. It's good enough for me to be here, and it's enough that I'm okay now. You need to take care of yourself, because nobody else is going to do it for you. You should at least treat yourself with kindness, especially if nobody else does. Story 43. My 6th grade teacher once drew a long, vertical bar on the board. She drew a line across the bottom 10th of it, and filled it in green. She pointed to it and told us, "This little green bar is your childhood. Once you have it, you can never come back, so enjoy it while you can, peeps." This makes me cry every time I think about it. She was the best teacher I've ever had, and my class was like family to me. The end of that year came far too fast, and we all had a big, crying group hug on the last day. She's very, very right. Childhood and its inherent naivete is beautiful, and it can never be re-experienced. I couldn't understand it at the time, but everything is different once you leave that little green bar, and it's not coming back. So I've always wondered about the paradox of psychology as it pertains to age. It's like when you're young, all you want to do is be older, and when you get old, all you want to do is be younger. At what point, at what age are we content and happy with the age that we are and where we are in life, and not longing for something that we either want and don't have or something that we used to have and don't have anymore? It's really fascinating to think about. Story 44. Life prepares you for death. In my 20s to 30s, I was the center of the world. I had a good, loving husband, healthy, confident kids, and many friends. I knew the culture, music, arts, theater, TV programs, etc. I had a well-paid, interesting job that helped other people. I listened to the news avidly and formed opinions about what was going on. I was in the world. Then, as I got older, I moved to the periphery. My kids left home, and although we still have a good relationship, they have their own families. I'm part of their families, but on the sidelines. They involve me, they love me, I love my grandchildren dearly, but I'm not needed as I used to be. I became out of touch with popular culture, music, celebrity culture, popular TV shows, and especially technology. My values began to feel out of date. I've now moved to a new phase. I don't just feel I don't fit into the world as I used to. I actively dislike what the world has become. I hate the aggressiveness of much communication, the coarseness of so much television culture, cancel culture, trolling, total intolerance of anyone whose views are different, identity politics, which drives a wedge between people. I could go on, but the net effect is that I don't really feel good in the world. I still have pleasure in my family, in nature, in exercise, and the company of friends, but when I'm old and frail, I'll be ready to check out. It's not a harsh truth, but true nonetheless. Story 45. Bad crap happens. It happens every day. Not fair or unfair. Life never was or will be about fair. It's about being willing to do what it takes. Like witnessing a police officer shoot a man in the back of the head while on his knees in handcuffs from about 15 feet away. Nothing was said. No one did a damn thing. I was in another country. It happened when I was visiting on my own, not there with the military. I served 22 years in the military. I've been to many countries. Innocence lost is the harshest truth. Learning that the world isn't about sunshine and butterflies. It's about protecting yourself and others any possible way and staying alive as long as you can. It's about the mental anguish of seeing what one human can do to another and feeling helpless at not being able to do anything. It's about how that and so many other things can haunt you for life afterwards. Stay safe. Take care of each other. Story 46. I spent 2 years locked in a room, by choice, in a mental state of complete chaos. I had many demons called OCD, anxiety, CPTSD, depression, and I was also in a Buddhist cult for the first year. I was in constant fear of everything. It was like my mind literally tortured me. The OCD was so bad, and the images from the PTSD were also awful. Both led to the anxiety and depression. Then came the dissociation where I didn't feel real, and it was so scary. All I would do was meditate for like 6 months. I meditated for 5 to 12 hours a day, usually higher numbers, all because those little demons in my brain kept telling me to. Otherwise, terrible things would happen. By October 2017, I just suddenly had an overwhelming thought while meditating that I had to confront and stop this madness. I literally felt something in my brain click, and it was like my OCD was gone, but I hadn't yet left the cult, so the madness didn't end there. I still did OCD-like rituals, but they were only based around the cult because cults make you act that way. I never have had an urge to wash my hands 20 times in a row since, like I did before. It took me about another year until I left the cult. During that time, I would paint abstract craziness to represent my mental state and hung them all over my walls. I started falling back into fear of not meditating enough. This was part of the cult rituals, and I stopped painting and started to go crazy for about a month again. But that is when I started journaling like a madwoman and started healing a lot of parts of myself. It was like self-therapy. I wasn't done, but I was close. And then another year to completely stop thinking that anything bad would happen to me for leaving the cult. I still had other things I was dealing with during those times, where the cult and my OCD wasn't ruling my brain. I also began researching psychology and spirituality like crazy. I learned so much during those times, and then began to research near-death experiences when I came across NDERF. In October of 2019, I decided to just give my life to Jesus with no fears, and all the madness stopped. I reconnected with my soulmate. Everything I had been praying for when I was in the cult for years came true in days when I asked Jesus for it instead. All of the insanity completely went away. Some things that hasn't been dealt with resurfaced because I needed to eradicate them from my mind, body, and spirit, but after praying for it, I was literally just given free therapy by the most wonderful EMDR therapist ever, who is also extremely qualified and is in position treating certain kind of victims that someone needs to be a top-notch therapist to treat. They are harsh truths because they're so simple and obvious, and yet many of us don't see them. 1. Love over fear. There's a RHCP song that goes, "A dude can't lose when he lives on love." Golden words of truth. Living based on love over fear brightens your world. We don't know how fear-based we are until we really examine all of our thoughts. It can be as simple as, I'm going to take care of my health because my body is a temple and I love my temple, not because I'm afraid of illness. 2. Jesus is literally all you need. Jesus equals love. Jesus is not about those judgmental a-holes who point their fingers at gays or abusive parents who twist Bible verses to justify their evil. Jesus is about love and peace and real life and freedom and everything good and beautiful. He does hear you. Keep knocking and the door will be opened. It's true. It happened to me, and I used to think none of that was true. Sometimes prayers aren't answered for a reason. I prayed my dog wouldn't die when I was 13, and she did. It was her time, but it needed to happen. It was for the greater good. I thought, this doesn't work at the time, but trust me, it does work more than you could ever even dream. Everything else I have ever prayed for has come true literally within days. It was just her time to go, and she became safe far away from my abusive parent. That is the truth that took me a long time to learn. I promise, if you're going through anything painful, just give it all up to Jesus and watch. I would not be saying this if it wasn't for what I experienced. I was in a cult. I know cults when I see them from a mile away. Having a relationship with Jesus is not culty or woo-woo. I don't go to church, but I don't advise against it either, as long as it's sticking to the message of love and not judging, which you're not supposed to do. The fact that so many churches and a-hole fake Christians have turned so many people away from this love makes me heartbroken. My life is not always sunshine and rainbows. No one's life is, but it is so much better than it was when I was locked in that effing room of hell. I mean, my brain, lol. The Beatles said it. All you need is love. Love is all you need. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to referencing Red Hot Chili Peppers lyrics. First of all, that's amazing. Anthony Kiedis, if you want to know like some real truth and feel some real heartfelt words of wisdom and advice, you don't necessarily have to listen to the Red Hot Chili Peppers, but just look up some of the lyrics that Kiedis writes in his songs. I mean, they're just so multi-layered, but so freaking relatable. I absolutely love that band. And then obviously the Beatles reference at the end about all you need is love. Yes, love is indeed all we need. Story 47. That a guy's value to the world is at its lowest in your teens and early 20s. Like how attractive you are to the opposite sex. Now, of course, this doesn't apply to every guy out there, and not everyone had a rough start, like anyone who became a billionaire in their 20s. And it took me a long time to realize it. There's a significant difference between a 20-year-old woman and a 20-year-old guy, the way society perceived it. As a guy, you don't hit your stride for another decade, 30s, but a woman can enjoy all that attention and crap from 15 to 30, because at the time, when I was 20, I didn't have my car or license or anything, really. I couldn't understand why girls kept rejecting me or not giving me a chance whatsoever. Of course, now that I'm 27, I understand it a bit better, and I've worked on certain areas pretty hard. It doesn't change the fact that I was extremely miserable and left in the cold for nearly 11 years. Things didn't start changing until I hit 25. Every year I'm getting better, but damn, 15 to 25 just effing sucked. Meanwhile, everyone else I knew was advancing, having relationships, getting better jobs. I just could not close that gap. Although, what's pretty funny is that the person who isn't so successful with women or anything early on can often end up doing significantly better than their peers later in life. It's strange, haha. So yeah, moral of the story here, stop comparing yourself to others. Stay in your lane, mind your own business, focus on yourself, and just be genuinely happy for other people's successes. Stop being envious and wishing that you had what they had. No one's life is the same. Lives don't run parallel like that. So yeah. Story 48. You can tell who your real friends are by who's standing beside you when things have gone bad. Every moment prior to that, there's no real way to know whether they're there to actually be your friend or just be there to ride the route to whatever they think you're going to become. Alternatively, but in the same vein, you can tell a lot about why a person is interacting with you by how they respond if you say no to one of their requests. For evidence, today is my 35th birthday. Last time I was on Facebook, I had more than 100 friends. I've got more than 150 numbers in my phone contact list. I woke up this morning to discover one email wishing me a happy birthday. 1. Since waking up 15 hours ago, one other person has done so, bringing the total count to 2. You don't have to be a genius to figure out where all my friends went when my life took a downward trajectory. I had friends everywhere when I was in position to help them solve their problems or serve them in some way. Story 49. The whole speech that boomer parents gave about finding a job was absolute bullcrap, and their method of hounding them until they cave is the best way to stay unemployed. Nobody wants to hire that kind of person, and if I were running my own business, I would toss out applications of people that did that. And along with the finding a job speech, the ethic of do every part of the job that you can while you're there, and they'll promote you so fast your head will spin, is more of a do every part of the job that you can while you're there, and they'll expect you to keep doing exactly that every day for the same crap pay they hired you at, and forget about getting a promotion then. You'll be too valuable in your position for them to lose you, so they would rather you quit than promote you. Story 50. That parents are never perfect. When I was 9, my mom had a recurring illness that eventually almost killed her. Thankfully, she's still alive. But along with that, she also cheated on my father with another guy we'll call Red for his privacy. Her and Red would often go camping together, and sometimes bring me and my siblings. I remember her often kissing him on the cheek and such. He had kids of his own that were younger than I am. I don't know them anymore. His wife was divorced, so he felt my mom was free game, even though she was married. Eventually, things started escalating and my dad found out. We tried to warn him of what was going on, we being my siblings and I, but he didn't listen to us and brushed it aside. Now that I'm 3 to 4 years older, I can see why he did that. But anyways, it got to the point where Red asked my mom to elope with him. Everything was crazy and full of crap. I remember having to yell at my parents and tell them to stop being such effing wimps and get their act together. They considered divorce for a long time, but eventually decided against it because it would have been bad for us. And so they decided to go out almost every day during the summer to repair their relationship. And guess who was suddenly responsible for looking after 4 siblings? Not my older sister. She was too immature and bratty to even consider looking after 2 toddlers and an 8-year-old. So suddenly, all the responsibility fell on me. I had already been doing my best to keep the family together by distracting my brothers when my parents were fighting and cooking them meals when my parents couldn't. But now I had to babysit my younger brothers 2, sometimes 3 days a week. But I didn't want them to grow up unhealthy and starved of a real childhood like I was being, so I read to them and played with them for months. Eventually, things got better with my parents. I didn't move on then either, however. I had matured far too quickly, and I was beginning to spiral into depression. At 9, I had my 10th birthday. But by then, I didn't even really care. I was just so done. I was too tired to cry. I stopped spending time with my family and stopped coming out of my room unless I needed something. I ended up turning to music as a last resort. It was really the only thing that kept me alive. Around a year later, about last year's New Year's, I finally told myself, all right, it's been a year and a half. Why aren't you moving on? It's time to let go and move away. It's time to let the past be the past. Everybody else has moved on, so my resolution for this year was to cut my losses and accept that I would never be the same. And in the end, I'm glad I did. It took time, but I'm glad I made that decision. Yeah, I grew up too quickly, but so what? I can use my wisdom to my advantage. I can be a more empathetic person. I'm better off now. I'm content. In about 2 months, it will have been a year. 12 months. To be honest, I'm surprised it's been that long. This year has been, but I'm finally looking forward to my future, and I'm happy about that. Story 51. No matter how much you can be struggling or how close you can think you are to people, you will always face rejection, whether that being from family, friends, partners, or just the people that surround you. Although it can be hard, you have to push through. You have to keep moving because otherwise, what's the point? There are always going to be ups and downs in life, and sometimes they can come out of nowhere and they can beat you beyond what you thought possible. You can feel the worst pain imaginable after being on top of the world the day before, and you just have to deal with it. No one can really help with it. Yeah, sure, your friends can say they're there for you, but how long is it before they change priorities? Your parents can tell you it happens to everyone and it's going to be okay, but that doesn't heal the void that's overpowering you right now. It hurts, and it hurts, and it effing hurts, but you have to live with it. And no one can really prepare you for the pains to come with the future, or the lingering pains of the past. Life isn't easy, that's for sure. And yet we're willing to live through all this pain for that small feeling of joy. Story 52. Death is incredibly final, unpredictable, and impossible to rationalize. I lost a very close friend who had just passed the bar in California, and I had visions of growing old and talking about life with him since I was very young. Never saw it coming, and nothing I've heard or experienced since his passing has helped me come to any very helpful conclusions as to why it happened, or how I could have been so wrong about him. It's been 4 years, and I can't help but think about him on a regular basis. Less now, I guess, than before, but at least every other day, I involuntarily associate to him. I don't know. Other than it really effing sucks and nothing makes it settle in my mind is okay. Story 54. There's always going to be someone better than you. When I was a kid, I was constantly being compared to others by my parents. Other kids often one-upping each other / excluding those who weren't skilled or talented, and visibly seeing yourself not performing well versus those who have skill at school. My self-esteem is better compared to back then, but I still have a bad habit of comparing myself to others, at least when it comes to seeing other professionals in my field and applying to jobs / volunteering / whatever else has a large pool of people competing with each other. Of course, there's the case where I'm always going to be better than somebody, but I don't want to exactly fall into the unsatisfactory, below expectations category. Like I said before, stop comparing yourselves to others. Your peace of mind will be so much better off if you just focus on yourself. Story 55. The idea that money can buy happiness is completely false. You can be homeless and on the streets with $1 in your pocket and be happier than anyone in the world. Also, try to keep things simple in life. Don't be that person that holds on to as much as they can. A good way to think of this, at least for me, is a desk. If you have a crap ton of stuff on your desk, you'll feel clustered in your head and won't be able to concentrate. Get rid of the crap you don't need. It will go a long way in relieving stress, which is very important. Also, as a final note, pursue happiness. Not wealth and fame. happiness. You can be the average McDonald's worker and be the happiest you've ever been, or the owner of the biggest corporation in the world and have to micromanage it and it drive you nuts. Find what makes you satisfied and happy and pursue it. For me, it's studying history. Others may be music, or maybe just peace and quiet. No matter what it is, pursue what makes you happy, as that matters above all else. Story 56. Sometimes you get so used to feeling a certain way for someone that you don't realize how you actually feel about them has changed. I hope that makes sense. If not, I'll give an example. You've been dating someone for years. It hasn't been the best relationship. There's fighting and a feeling of instability, and like the rug can be ripped out from under you any moment, and things will come crashing down. You feel like you've always put in, cared, and loved more. Then one day, as you're thinking about things and this person, you realize you've gotten so used to fighting for them and the relationship that you didn't even realize you don't want it anymore. It just hits you that you don't feel like you used to, and you don't even know why you tried so hard for so long. This can be a pretty scary, liberating, and freeing feeling. There's dread because you've wasted time and wasted all this effort, but you can take comfort in knowing it wasn't really wasted. You've learned lessons, learned about yourself and what you're willing to compromise on, and what is solid for you. And you realize you can leave and you will be okay. One day. Story 57. Not the harshest, but for myself, the most recent and relevant one. Your birthday isn't about you. It's about what your family and or friends want to do, and the older you get, the truer it is. I just want to lay down in my stupid recliner, sleep all day and watch House, but I have to go to my mom's apartment and have lunch while she sings happy birthday to me. That whole dumb tradition is awkward in itself, but even more so when it's just one person singing. Then have cold pizza from my sister's favorite pizza place and my dad's favorite ice cream cake because no one besides me wants some dank-ass cake from the awesome bakery down the road. And it doesn't even matter anyway because I have a serious problem with controlling my eating, so what difference does it make? But on the bright side, I guess, is that my mom is gonna make me some potato salad, and her potato salad is the best goddamn potato salad you could ever hope to have. Any potato salad you could possibly think of is lame as F compared to the crap my mom makes. It's like angels dancing on your tongue, and everyone who's ever tried it agrees. Like, my dad hates my mom, lol, but when I bring home a trough of her potato salad, he's all about that crap. Story 58. You never get the time back. Ever. When I was about 21, my grandfather, the absolute best person I ever knew in my life, who took me fishing when I was a kid and taught me how to tie flies and was just a very nice human, died of lung cancer. I had never really had to confront death before in person, and he was in really bad shape. It scared me. I didn't know how to deal with it. I saw him before he died, but I had a really hard time being in the room because I just couldn't stand to see him in the state he was in. Maybe I thought at the time it would have changed my memories of him. I don't know. But when he died, I wished that I'd been there more, held his hand, talked to him about whatever a dumb 21-year-old kid could talk about. I know he knows I loved him, but to this day, my biggest regret in life is not just laying out to him what a hero he was for me in those final moments. He was a wonderful person, and I'll never have that chance now. If I've learned anything from that experience, it's to tell the people you care about how much you care about them from time to time. You never know. Only in that instance did I know, and I hate that I missed out on the chance to leave my grandfather with the absolute truth about how greatly he'd affected my life. Story 59. Okay, when I was little, I wanted to be a hero, so the closest thing was to be a police officer. I admired the job and dreamed a lot about being one since cops are the good guys. They're fair and we can always trust them. Well, when I was 19, I went to a bar with friends. Between those friends, there was a girl, Natasha, and a guy, Marcos, who was a black person. One guy at the bar approached Natasha and started touching her, and Marcos stopped the guy, and they got in a fist fight. Police got involved, and I was the first one who approached them and told the story of what happened. They took the guy outside of the bar to talk. I saw in the corner of my eye the guy handing them a lot of money. They went back in, took Marcos with them. 3 days later, Marcos was found dead, and after that, it hit me like a truck full of bricks what happened, and I lost all my dreams because I learned that day that not all cops are good guys. Sorry if I misspelled anything. English isn't my first language, and I'm on the phone. Story 60. Here's one for the less social of us. Some people just aren't meant to stay in your life. You never know how much this is true until you have to live through it. I've heard this a lot. From my mother, from my brother, from the few people I've ever really connected with. For a while, I thought it was nothing new. This year alone, though, I've kept thinking about this friend I had online 4 or 5 years ago. I struggle to maintain active connections and keep friends, so the people who fade away always stick with me. This person, in specific, is someone I've missed. A lot of people don't start conversations with me. I have to start them, and even then, very few people are actually interested in what I'm saying. This person cared about me. They sought out conversations, even if they went nowhere. They wanted my attention. All of this in a year where I was starting to hit rock bottom in terms of loneliness and isolation. One thing led to another, and I got them on Tumblr where I could supposedly talk to them more. I ended up trying to make friends with a person they were in a relationship with and made them very uncomfortable. I deleted my account not long after that. I still look back at their old blog, things she would post. That blog hasn't been updated in 3 years. Nothing about going away or a new blog by some other way to talk to them. As far as I'm concerned, they're either dead or have blended into the billions of people that surround me every day. Part of me tried dreaming about meeting them again, but all I have to go off are memories that are slowly fading and illustrations they drew from the social media platform I met them on, which shut down 3 years ago. I've taken to embracing this idea that they've moved on with their life, and so should I. I lack the motivation or energy to get out there and connect with people who should be my friends, but if it means I meet more people like her, it's all the more worth it. Story 61. That I don't matter to anyone. I was homeless once for a year, which was a horrifying shock to my system. I was, I thought, a well-liked person. I had, I thought, good friends. I always worked and I thought I'd always be able to support myself. I just felt so let down by everyone in my life. I'd spent all this time doing free babysitting for aunts and cousins. None of them had a couch for me when I needed a place to sleep. I volunteered everywhere. When my ex-boyfriend was having a coming-out crisis, I went to see him and help him through it. When I needed something, none of my family, friends, whoever, no one was there for me. It was the most horrible letdown. I wasn't being kind to people to build up credits to cash in, but it was so hard to learn that no one saw me the same way and no one reciprocated. I had used all this time and energy on people who had just been using me. ETA. The worst is one of my cousins, who's a Catholic priest. He's never even called to check on me during the time I was homeless. He's younger than most priests, so he's featured all the time as a young, bright hope of the church. He's all over YouTube, and he was in the Boston Globe recently, but he's one of the least Christian people I've ever met. He just enjoys attention and an excuse to be pompous. During the time I was homeless, so many Jewish orgs, black churches, weird non-denominational charismatics, all of them helped, even though I wasn't one of them. But not Catholicism, which is what I was raised in. Not one even returned my calls. Not at the parish level, not nonprofits. Once they can't extract money or free labor from you, you're dead to them. For all the pro-life nonsense, they shoot their wounded. Story 62. You need money to make money and earn respect. When I started my first stable job in 1998, I lived with my cousin and her husband for a couple months as I couldn't afford a place to rent. I eventually moved out and rented in a very LCOL area, which was 2 hours away from my office. Although they didn't say anything, but I never felt welcome, which made me feel guilty living there. It was a big city, and I didn't know anyone else there, so I endured 2 months with them. Although my salary was very low, they were both working professionals, I offered to share expenses, which they refused, but in a way which made me feel crappy. I cannot explain it. They weren't disrespectful or anything, but the vibes which I got weren't pleasant. In those 2 months and subsequent months in my small rented apartment, I learned a few lessons. 1. Never rely on family and friends to help you in your need. Even if they do it, will probably make you feel like crap. 2. Never put yourself in a situation where you'd have to ask for help. 3. You need money to earn respect. 4. Whatever you earn, you can always save, and you need money to make money. Even though my salary was low, I saved every bit I could. I sacrificed a lot by not spending money on irrelevant things and saved. I grew my bank balance like a person possessed. Today, 22 years later, I'm FI and on the way to RE. Story 63. Just because family members loved you as a child doesn't mean they'll give a crap about you once you're an adult. My dad's siblings were my best friends as a kid. Once I'm an adult and they have a feud with my parents, they no longer give a crap about me. Uncle who drove me around in his car, hanging out the top window, bang, doesn't care for me. Uncle who jumped on beds with me, bang, doesn't care about me. Me and my siblings are like best friends. Can't believe any family is different. Dad's siblings threw him under the bus as soon as he started struggling with drugs. Threw his wife, my mom, under the bus as well, even though she practically raised the youngest. Grandfather was an alcoholic, abusive a-hole. Didn't give a crap about the kids they once treated as their own baby dolls they, quote, loved so much. Story 64. Everyone's saying how quickly people turn on you. I'm going to say the opposite. It's frightening how quickly people you loved can be rendered irrelevant to you in the face of your life changing. And it's frightening how quickly shared experience ceases to matter in the face of irreconcilable lifestyles and ideology. Your interpretation and impression of a person does not encompass who they actually are. It's just a set of observations you yourself have made about the information that the individual in question has provided. Some people are open, some people are very versed at masking their true thoughts and intentions. Self-improvement is universally met with resistance if you're holding yourself to strict standards that your social group doesn't follow. Sometimes you're the one who's doing the rejecting. Nobody but yourself and a small handful of people have the patience for your trauma or baggage, and expecting strangers to care about it is folly. Story 65. No matter how hard I work, how smart I am, or what I accomplish in my life, people only see me as fat. I've never been praised for anything in my life as much as I have for trying to lose weight. I've attained a degree, promotions, and accomplished goals I'm extremely proud of, but no one ever says crap about any of that. But I lost a handful of pounds and suddenly everyone had something nice to say. Unfortunately, over quarantine, I gained them back, and we're back to square one as always of nothing being an accomplishment. Being fat is not who I am, but I'm nothing but fat to everyone around me. I effing hate being defined by my fatness, by people who know nothing about me. And F doctors for blaming literally everything on my weight that has nothing to do with my weight. I'm not just fat, I'm a effing person. Story 66. I've mentioned this on one of the Ask Reddits before, but basically, you can do everything right and still fail. This is something that is not only a truth, but an inevitability. Whether in love, friendships, or even your professional life, you can do everything right and still fail. This concept is extremely harsh on a lot of people. Those who encounter it the first time, but can't see it for what it really is, tend to react poorly. A lot of our narrative, built up around life, is that if you work hard enough, you can achieve anything. And while that's mostly true, as a blanket statement, it's a little too tidy. No one succeeds 100% of the time, and no one truly great got there without failing too many times to count. But still, a lot of people get wrapped up in the idea that if they didn't succeed, they're somehow imperfect, broken, incapable, inept, etc., and it's simply not true. It's okay to look for flaws in your actions, but you won't always find them. And if you can't find them, that doesn't reflect poorly on you. Failure is a component of success, no matter where, no matter who. If you build resilience from there, you'll go on to do great things. Story 67. Most of us have wrong ideas about death. When we think about dying, most of us imagine being old, surrounded by their loved ones, having lived their life, when in reality, you can die any moment. It does not seem a very profound thought, but I realized its gravity during this year. Lost so many people all of a sudden, without any warning. Hell, no one even died of COVID. One friend's brother, a charismatic kid with a bright future, went out for 5 minutes to buy groceries in the morning, got T-boned and died on the spot. A relative sitting in a family gathering slowly started to doze off while telling a story, and then just completely silent. Another got mosquito bites while sleeping. Pretty normal, except it turned out to be the dengue. Died by the morning. These were just 3 of about a dozen people I saw dying within the last 15 to 18 months. None of them would have thought they were living their last moments. Made me really change my perspective on things and change priorities. Story 68. That my mom doesn't love me and maybe never did. We grow up thinking our parents will just love us and care for us. We kind of have to believe that as kids, but sometimes they just don't, I guess. I don't know. It's not just how she is, because I see how she is with my sister. If my sister is upset, she's comforted. If I'm upset, I'm supposed to get over it. We're both girls, and she's older. If my sister does well, she's praised. If I do well, it's not enough. I was depressed for over a decade, and only finally began to work towards happiness after accepting that I will never get the love I want from this person, and I stopped trying. I went 100% no contact, mourned the loss of my mother, and began to move on. It took years still, but I'm so much better. I have a MIL who loves me and calls me her daughter, and she cheers me on and supports me like I always wanted my own mom to. So, yeah. If you don't have homemade mother's love, store-bought is fine. Story 69. That the world is ugly. The integrity of the United States, on the social, political, and economic level, is and has been rotting from the inside out for decades. The government is unfathomably corrupt. Everybody's in somebody's pocket, all with skeletons in the closet. Meanwhile, our socioeconomic structure is wildly off balance. The rich are growing richer, while millions work their lives away just so they can afford to live. Others aren't so lucky, and here we are, hating each other over a decision of rich, wealthy old man gets to use us to make himself wealthier. And there's nothing any of us can do to change a damn thing. It will only get worse from here. You know it, I know it, and they know it too. But the most upsetting part is that considering all of this, the world is still uglier than you and I will ever really know. Story 70. That I am morally responsible for how I spend my money. Whilst some can be chalked up to obscurity, as the good place makes a good point of, it's not feasible for me to spend half my life researching the ethics of products. But the same can't be said for all products. I know when buying a hamburger, I'm saying that killing a cow and the environmental damage of animal agriculture justifies not switching to a veggie burger. And I couldn't live with cognitive dissonance, so I stopped doing it. Good news was, the blow that I'd been acting immorally by my own ethics my whole life was much harder than the actual switch. It's like they say, the hardest part of a run is putting your trainers/sneakers on. Story 71. People can be so nice, then change as soon as they get something from you they want. Real-life devil in disguise, heart-wrenching BS. The nicest I was ever treated by my ex was the day I went to have an abortion done at his demand and ended up needing to really nurse myself at his place. Round 2 of a turbulent relationship. Didn't live together. I was pregnant once before with him and miscarried early on in another bad patch. For the record, these are my only pregnancies at 31 years old. I recall he even got me a handmade necklace. I felt actually like I had support. The next day, after I managed to get back to my place to rest up, the ghosting and old familiar games picked up like clockwork. As for the necklace, I threw it in a river and it was much needed release. As for me, no more bio kids. My experience was no fun. Cats make me feel like a mom now. In these times, I'm glad I do not have 2 kids with a man who had to beg to want me too often. I hope this helps one person. Yeah, there's some feelings of shame, but we're free to tell our reality. My situation is more common than many realize. Story 72. If you develop trust issues, either get lucky and find someone you can actually trust, or accept you will likely never be able to trust another human being again. I'm okay knowing I can't trust anyone, but it's terrifying to both those who do have trust and to many, who no longer can. It's okay to be alone. It just sucks not having anyone have your back. It's okay to have to endure every single day, because everyone else has to incessantly treat you like crap, never relenting. People, be nice to others, and at least try to be friends with others who are down from life. You may be the only person who will ever actually treat them like another person. Edit. I do have people I know who will be nice to me, and those people are wonderful. I treat them with as much respect as I can because they're deserving. But that doesn't mean I know I can trust them. It means I know where I won't have to suffer from torment for 5 to 15 minutes. Assuming my mind shuts the F up anyway. Story 73. You could choose to see the silver lining, the bright side as people otherwise call it. You may not be someone who requires a roof over their head. You may not be someone who grew up without parents, or worse, grew up with abusive ones. You may not have been the one to hold the people close to you in your arms as they slowly fade away into oblivion. You may not be the only one who is indicted of a crime you were not guilty of committing. You may not be the person who goes to bed broke and hungry. You may not be the person who has no one to talk to. The harsh reality is that despite this perspective, it's immeasurably hard for us to make a choice to see the bright side in real time. It's criminally easy to fall into the vicious cycle of self-pity and self-hate despite being self-aware. The most disciplined people find their resolve shattered in the face of adversity. What's worse is that the space of regret, things you could not accomplish, is infinite. The biggest battle is reminding ourselves of perspective, and very few people barely pass this test. Being comfortable in the face of change and uncertainty is the only sword we can sharpen. The little moments we revel in, be it due to dopamine-inducing hedonistic pursuit or in serotonin-inducing service, is the only painkiller. Stay strong. Story 74. There's a bunch that come to mind. Let's see. And all these are serious, at least to me. 1. Growing up sucks. It's not as easy as many adults make it seem. I'm a young adult now, and I'm freaking out over how I'm supposed to pay my college education and other various bills. 2. You can lose your friends in an instant. I've lost many friends in the blink of an eye because of things I've said and or done. It's nothing overly bad/inappropriate, just something that accidentally offended the other person and they left. 3. No one is looking out for you in real life like they were in high school. In high school, it was pretty clear when things were due, what was happening when. Now in college, even with this COVID time, everything is online, and I have trouble remembering to check because I don't have that reminder to turn in a paper. 4. Sometimes you have to keep your feelings to yourself. When I like a girl, I become friends with them first, and then try to work up the courage to ask them out. But 9 out of 10 times this happens, they say they don't like me back, and then things are awkward between us. I end up losing them. See number 2. In fact, it happened recently with a friend of mine, and we're still in the awkward talking phase where I'm too scared to say anything because I'm afraid to go too far in the friendship for good, and my confession of love is still fresh on the mind. 5. Having a girl have a crush on / had a crush on who's friends with your roommate really sucks. When that crush turns you down, but is friends with your roommate so she's constantly in your room or on FaceTime with him, you get really depressed. Story 75. When I was around 4 years old, I learned I was forbidden to love one of my parents in front of the other. My parents got separated when I was 1 year old, and it seems it was a nasty separation, with lawyers involved and all. I don't remember anything, so it didn't affect me, but damn. When I was around 4 years old, I talked about my mom to my dad I could only see during weekends. He stared at me dead in the eyes like I did the worst thing in the world, and told me very firmly, like he was mad at me or like he needed me to be on the same page as him, that my mom was a effing stupid woman. I'm not an English native, so the words I just used seem really light in comparison to the bomb effect my father's words had on me. Whatever your family situation is, it hurts more than anything to be denied the love you naturally have for your parents. I'm 28 today, and that single moment is still very vivid in my memory. Parents have read it in full divorce or separation. Effing stop pushing your hatred on your kids. You effing idiots. Story 76. This is only so far in my 22 years, but thus far, despite my thinking of avoiding the oh, woe is me mentality, I truly never pushed for something better. All I've been doing is staying down and waiting for something to come my way despite not taking action. I used to cry often before when life and people punched me down, but for the past 3 years, I've been unable to cry, supposedly because I couldn't feel so strongly anymore. But that was false thinking. I began crying quite recently again, and after the second time, I realized I didn't cry before because I didn't have anything. Now I have something to grasp and it's slipping out of my hands because of my lack of action, and that was what finally made me feel again. I'm trying. I really am, to keep holding to, which I wish not to lose. Anyway, I'm closing Reddit now to focus on my task at hand of holding on. Story 77. It's still hard to believe. How can this be allowed by the universe? But it seems that true love isn't always equally reciprocated. We're going to die, and try as we might, we have no idea what happens after. That's enough for a panic attack every night before bed until that day. Most adults are really children pretending to be adults. Half the people are of below average intelligence. When the Titanic was sinking, lots of people went on like it wasn't and didn't wear life vests. When COVID hit, lots of people didn't wear masks. Despite all the logic behind it, their fears and anxieties at the most crucial of times flew out the window, and that's common human nature. Common sense isn't that common. Most of us spend most of our time indulging in escapism. Games, drinking, drugs, movies, reading, whatever distracts us from reality. Get us the hell out of here. Retired people would rather do what they did during their retirement during their youth, and when they had the energy. But yeah, it's normal to waste youth in the office. You can have amazing talent and still never receive any recognition. That's based on luck. Oh dear God, I need decent therapy. Too bad it's crazy expensive and lasts 1 hour every 4 months if I'm lucky enough to jump on an availability. And maybe I'll also be lucky enough to find one that doesn't want to talk about themselves or about nothing at all and actually help for once. But hell, 13th time's the charm, right? It's rare that a parent will honestly tell you that they hate being a parent, even if it's true. Some warning would be nice. It's not for everyone, and not all parents love their children. Story 78. Harshest truth I've ever learned. Sometimes you can do everything right, and your body will still do its best to die in spite of any and all of your best practices. When I was 24, I was at the prime of my life. I had been a strict dietary vegan for 5 years, and did consistent research to make sure I was getting essential nutrients from food sources rather than supplements whenever possible. I practiced Ashtanga yoga 4 to 6 times a week and lived in a neighborhood where walking was just amazingly fun. I barely drank alcohol or soda, and most importantly, my mental health was positive. Despite all of this, I was suffering from chronic sinus migraines, interspersed with chronic regular migraines. I was dismissed by multiple doctors as just being a regular woman who suffered from migraines and told to move along. Finally, one doc delved deeper and didn't like what he heard. He ordered an MRI and we discovered a brain tumor the size of a golf ball in my fourth ventricle. Literally nothing I had done had caused it. My dedication to my physical and mental health did nothing to counteract it. I was at least told when we resected it in 2011 that there is a nearly 1 in a million chance of this thing ever coming back. This February, before lockdown, we discovered a new mass growing. It is coming back, and again, there's nothing I have or haven't done that is causing this. Then I caught COVID, despite all the precautions I could take. I did everything my docs told me to do, but given my luck, I caught long COVID. I was sick from early April to mid-August, and then, as a matter of course, developed post-COVID syndrome in the form of ME/CFS, while having a bloody tumor. Story 79. I don't think they realized it, but I had a group of friends that would make me the butt of a joke whenever I was around. When I was one-on-one with them, they were kind, but when we were a group, I was the target of jokes, pranks, ridicule, etc., and I always bared it with a smile. One time, we all got together for a wedding and stayed at one of their houses. I went to bed early, but the door was open and I could hear them all talk about me. They didn't just make fun of me while I was with them, they made fun of me when they were together. I was the group joke. They may have liked me, but they didn't respect me. While I lay there in bed, listening to all of that, I thought about all the other friendships I had and realized that most of them shared a similar pattern. I stopped talking with them and anyone else who treated me that way. I became more selective with friends and became much more private. I enjoy a good joke at my expense, but I learned to shut it down if it gets too far. I learned not to be gullible and too trusting. There were a lot of truths I learned from that. Story 80. I feel like I've lived my life working hard, showing respect, and had good morals. Was in a relationship for 10 years. I have 3 beautiful girls. I'd made 35 years in life with no issues. I ran into a manager at work whose personality and ethics/morals I had not come across in my life. Long story short, through a combination of long hours, a toxic work environment, and an inability to have a life out of work, I had a breakdown. Stress, anxiety, and cluster migraines were common and eventually turned into depression. I held on as long as possible, but eventually after 6 months I quit. As soon as I did it, I felt a shift in my relationship. My ex never worked and I never asked her to work. I was happy for her to be a stay-at-home mother. I won't go into great detail, but I never felt like she was putting in effort to work as a team. After a 16-hour day, I'd come home and could work another 8, just getting the house in order and giving the kids the time they needed. I could go on, but what happened eventually is I stopped trying to make everything perfect. I stopped cleaning up after everyone, I stopped taking care of the house, inside and out, and I stopped asking if she was okay, with the expectation that as soon as work piled up, she might step in and help. No, what happened was she got angry. Angry that the house looked like crap. There were dishes building up. There was laundry building up, and the place was a mess. You're only as loved and respected as you are willing to work, no matter what other people are doing. I may have chosen a horrendous life partner and mother to my children. That's on me. But after going through all this, she does the one thing that she has left in her arsenal. The one thing that any woman can do if the argument is going her way. After a vocal argument about the kids' school attendance, an argument that she obviously didn't appreciate, the police show up, and after a bit of back and forth, I'm arrested in front of all 3 of my children. We go to court, and she admits to false accusations, which makes no difference at all. She gets to keep going with her life. She expects me to come home like nothing ever happened. I do not, and find a 1-bedroom studio until I can get back on my feet. She's bitter I've made this choice, so the last remaining weapon are the children. For 6 months after we separated, I've simply copped her toxic BS on the chin, just so that I could see my children. In that 6 months, based on her mood and behavior, I've probably seen my kids separately and never all together about 3 days out of 6 months. The eldest I haven't seen at all due to parental alienation, and I don't expect that relationship to turn around. It's my honest belief now that you need to take what you want from this world. Be the a-hole. Don't try and have good expectations of other people. Just look after yourself. Having said that, I'm 40 and I won't be changing who I am now. There's no point. All that I built up in this world has gone. The only thing that made me whole, my children, have been taken, and I will never be able to be the parent that I set out to be. Not everyone can succeed at life. I fell down to get back and try over and over, while other people are on easy mode and get to experience life in such a beautiful way. It sucks, but it's reality. Story 81. 99% of women will only assign value to you based on what you can provide for them, especially romantic relationships. If she has an ex or a new acquaintance that they just don't jive with, it doesn't matter that you're a great match for her. You'll still lose to him if he makes significantly more money than you. I was a 6-month placeholder for my last girlfriend to wiggle her way back into her ex-boyfriend's life. They had a mutual breakup because they just weren't compatible, and I can verify that they aren't. She spent that 6 months learning a new trade, which puts her in his professional life. I supported her struggle and accomplishments. As she made progress and plans to build her own company, she literally worked at a pot shop while they dated. I helped her because I wanted her to succeed, and it was a field I went to college for. She started spending more and more time with him, until she decided that he and her were going to Vegas to stay at his dad's mansion. I told her that this was crossing my boundaries. She had zero issue with that, so I broke it off. 2 weeks later, she posted pictures of their trip. Yeah, there were romantic pictures of them. They truly aren't a good match personality-wise, but she definitely wants his money, lifestyle, and business contacts. Basically, most people, especially women, will choose a guy that they don't have good chemistry with if he can give her a better material life than you, even if you and her are a great team and have excellent chemistry. Story 82. Almost every argument stems from assumptions. These assumptions aren't always made maliciously, but because we're trying to fill in gaps. When someone does or says something and we don't understand their motivations, we search for some sort of explanation. But our explanation for these actions are almost always 100% wrong because our explanations are through a filter of our own experience. Well, the only reason I would say or do that thing is if this were the reason. So we fill in the gap with our own narrative. That causes us to pass judgment on the other person, but that judgment is based on our own assumptions. Over time, without proper communication, you end up with a caricature of that person in your mind, who they are, what they're about, what's important to them, what their motivations are. But it's all really wrong. We need to remember to ask why someone did or said something and avoid filling in those gaps ourselves. When you do this, you'll begin to realize that your initial explanation is almost always wrong, that the filter of your experience is blinding you to all other possible explanations. Story 83. One day when I was a young boy on holiday in Uberwald, I was walking along the bank of a stream when I saw a mother otter with her cubs. A very endearing sight, I'm sure you'll agree, and even as I watched, the mother otter dived into the water and came up with a plump salmon, which she subdued and dragged onto a half-submerged log. As she ate it, while of course it was still alive, the body split, and I remember to this day the sweet pinkness of its roes as they spilled out, much to the delight of the baby otters, who scrambled over themselves to feed on the delicacy. One of nature's wonders, gentlemen, mother and children dining upon mother and children. And that is when I first learned about evil. It's built into the very nature of the universe. Every world spins in pain. If there's any kind of supreme being, I told myself, it is up to all of us to become his moral superior. Terry Pratchett, Unseen Academicals. Sadly, it ain't gonna happen. Much as I miss Sir Terry, I'm glad he did not live long enough to be sure just how badly we failed. Story 84. That no matter how hard you work, sometimes to fix mistakes, a relationship can't always be salvaged. I met my ex-wife when I was 15 at a summer camp. We were friends for years and finally started dating in college. After we graduated, I moved to NYC and we moved in together and eventually got married. We both made mistakes along the way. Usual stupid stuff young people do. Not being smart enough about money and not communicating effectively. I'll admit, more of the mistakes were on my side, though I doubt she'd admit to any of the mistakes on her part. I worked very hard to change and made a ton of progress and thought I'd done enough to heal the damage from the past. Didn't turn out that way. She ended up deciding to leave me for a mutual friend after lying to me about having feelings for him for a while. So, no matter what you've said about someone being the love of your life, no matter if you vowed to stay with each other till death do you part, There's not always a path back to where you once were. Story 85. Some people will not change. Yes, humans by nature go through changes in their life. We learn, we adapt, we evolve. But there are some changes that will only happen if you make them change. Unlearning toxic behaviors, disavowing incorrect views you used to have. Just in general, making an effort to be a better person takes effort. There are a lot of narcissists out there, a lot of people with rock-solid egos, some people who believe that they're always right, and therefore don't need to change. These people can be your friends, your family, your partner. When a loved one behaves this way, you want to see them change. You need for them to better themselves. But like I said, sometimes you need to force yourself to make a change in order to do so for the better. Some people just refuse to change, so they never will. My advice? Let them go. I know you love them and want to see them improve, but you've seen them repeat the same cycle for years and ignore any advice or criticism. You can't help them. Be free of the narcissist. The only positive change you can make is to leave them. Story 86. Sometimes you just can't teach someone to be a nicer person, no matter how much you want to. I had a friend I met in the 6th grade. We were best friends all the way through high school. Around the time we were 16 years old, he started going through things at home. No matter how hard I tried to be there for him, or listen to him, or help him in any way, it was never enough, and he slowly became an angry person. Full abuse towards me and our other friends and his family and even strangers. I supported him in times I really shouldn't have, like when he beat up his parents. I loved him and believed it was only because he was in pain that he was acting this way, and that he could change. There were so many late nights when he would stay at my house and we would lie in bed together. He would just sob to me, telling me he hated who he was and that he hated how he treated everyone and how he wanted to change. I supported him through everything like I always did. I never ignored him during those talks, and I tried to help him be a better person. After 3 years, he never did become a better person. He always said he wanted to be less angry and abusive toward people, but a few hours later, he would scream in your face about how he hated you and hoped you would experience something terrible. It was a cycle he seemed to be addicted to, even after 3 years. Eventually, I just gave up on him. Sometimes I'm ashamed to say it, like I should have given him more time and maybe I could have helped him better. Then I remember the many, many times he manipulated me into thinking he would be nicer to me, starting now, and conveniently forgetting that promise the next day. Or the time that he made my girlfriend so uncomfortable that she broke up with me by calling her a slur. Or the unknown amount of times he beat up kids at school. Or the time he literally almost killed his own mom. Story 87. 1. Moving out on your own around the same time your parent passes away makes learning basic life skills, financial skills, and other general things you would ask your parents for advice more difficult. Learned all about handling an estate the same time I was learning what I needed for groceries and budgeting for it. I have the other parent, but was pretty much estranged after they divorced. I couldn't imagine those who lost their parents earlier or never had a mother/father figure. 2. Trying to make one-sided relationships work is detrimental to mental and physical health. Learn your self-worth, and being alone is better than being with a useless a-hole. There's always someone better out there. 3. Prioritize mental health. Go to the freaking doctor. Don't be afraid of potentially needing therapy or meds to feel okay again. Learn positive coping mechanisms. Nobody deserves to feel like crap, and maybe if meds make you feel better, then you can do more to improve your life. Stop wallowing in self-pity. Story 88. I got married to my playgroup crush at 17. We were from different walks of life, but we thought our opposites could work. We had a child at 18. We had a really rocky relationship, largely due to the fact that she was hiding a terminal illness that revealed itself once our son was born. She was a sloth and had been for years, but I tried my hardest to help her because she said she wanted to change. 3 medically necessary abortions and 6 denied kidney transplants from pure negligence later, she still wouldn't change. She passed in September and left me with our 14-year-old son and all the bills. Hardest truth to swallow is you can't change people who don't want to change. 17 years of pain and misery and sorrow went down the drain on a pre-comatose rant about her wanting Mountain Dew and cigarettes. Then, bam, death. Couldn't even talk to our son about it, just died stubbornly. selfishly and violently. Hardest part was I worked tirelessly to help, just to later find out she never cared I had the money, so that was my only role. Don't put more effort into someone than they do themselves. Story 89. You're going to leave people you love behind someday in your life. I've struggled with this since my first child turned 2. I have 2 boys now, 6 and 4 years old, and one day, hopefully not for a very long time, I won't be there for them or with them. I lost my dad when I was 15 to a heart attack, and that has plagued my mind for the last 10 years. I'm so scared the same thing is going to happen to me and, in turn, my kids. My stepfather died when I was 25, my mom when I was 27, and last year, when I was 34, my sister died of a heroin overdose. I'm the only one left from the home I grew up in, and I feel so scared about leaving my wife and boys without me. I'm scared of dying. I'm scared of the performance of it. I want to be here to see them grow up, find partners in life, have a kid if they choose to, start a career. I want to see it all. And alas, at some point in time, I won't see them and they won't see me. And it's sadly something that haunts me and takes up mental capacity in my head that I wish was better used on appreciating the memories I'm building with them now. Story 90. Do not wait. Example. At work, be one of 10, not one of 100. Try to be the one people ask after. Do not just blend in. Health. It might be awkward, but rather have an awkward appointment than rush to the hospital. Do not live with pain. Get yourself checked out. Friends. Be dependable. Be open and sacrifice yourself. You never know when you need a friend back. Family. Family is who you want it to be. Do not hang around a toxic bunch due to some blood ties. A great friend can be a better sister or brother than a blood relative. Hobby. Get multiple. One at home and one outside. Myself? Gaming at home and Magic TG/Warhammer 40k. Do not wait for life to start. Work on it now. Have fun. You're not getting time back, so make sure you enjoy it. Story 91. Growing up, I always felt different, like I didn't belong in the family I was born into. I didn't look like any of my 4 siblings, mom or dad. Everyone had nice hair and I didn't, and I really didn't get along with anyone. Being diagnosed with mental illness didn't help any. I was always told from a young age. I was told I looked like my dad's mom, who was really fair-skinned, big, and had shoulder-length hair. I knew better. I also had behavior issues, kind of a hothead, but never started drama. More like the finisher. I was always in and out of juvenile detention. My mom picked me up from juvie and told me on the way to get food that my dad wasn't my dad. It hit me like a bomb later that night. Memories of my dad came rushing in like a flood. I had a massive panic/anxiety attack, which sent me into full-blown depression for a month. My dad found out the week before I found out, which hurt more. He started treating me different than my other siblings. I was able to talk to him and mend our relationship after about a year. Later that year, he passed away. Story 92. That I'm inhuman and a terrible person for eating meat. My childhood friend became vegan from nowhere and started to send me videos of chickens getting mangled by a factory in China, etc., as well as cows getting beheaded or so by Muslim traditions. And we live in a country where all of that is illegal, which means food here, or more meat here, is done, killed, in a better way. Quick death that doesn't let the animal feel pain. So, makes no sense to me that she sends me videos about how other countries do it, when we don't buy their meat, but meat by our own country. However, I had been her friend since I was 6 until age 19, before she decided to go savage extreme vegan meat hater and hater on everyone that wears brands made of skin. And she used to love skin and fur bags. Effing hypocrite. She had also started a YouTube channel and stops to show me on Instagram, etc. And when I do the same towards her, she says, "Why aren't you following me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, same to you." And then she follows me and I follow her back. A week later, she unfollows again. I do the same and she asks about it again. I say, "Hey, I'm not your fan. I was legit your bestie since we were 6. Was if she was possessed. However, I got tired of her, removed her as a friend from everywhere, and never contacted her again.